Okay, so I just want to welcome you here this evening. My name is Miani Lawson, and I'm the executive director and founder of Bergen-Lafayette Montessori School, located in Jersey City. And tonight I just wanted to talk to you about the world of early childhood education that many people have not yet explored. And it's called Montessori education. And so, whether you're working in a classroom already or you're, still in school or just curious about it, then, this is kind of what the session is designed for. We're interested very much in our school in bringing more people into the world of Montessori because we feel like it's fantastic. So just to tell you a little bit more about our school, we were founded, I founded the school in 2014. I was looking for a school for my daughter. She was 2.5, 3 years old at the time, and I was not finding what it is that I was, looking for, what it was that I was looking for, which was a diverse, progressive education for her. And so after going to about 30 schools, I decided to go ahead and found Bergen-Lafayette Montessori School. I had been an educator already by that time for 15 years or so. And, but I had some familiarity with Montessori, but I decided to explore it more and to go and get my Montessori training and open the school. So we serve children from infant through fifth grade. And our whole premise is that we are committed to equity, access to authentic Montessori education, so that all families can have access to this incredible, what we feel is an incredible method of education. And one thing that we do at our school is that we accept the New Jersey Child Care Subsidy voucher. That helps low income families to be able to attend the school. So, one thing that we believe in Montessori education is that school should not be a place for young people to come and watch old people work. Okay, we should never hear children saying that they are bored. For people to sit there and think that this is something that children just need to deal with, we do not agree with. This is a quote from Harry Wong. He was an American educator, an author, and he was also a motivational speaker. And he was known for his influential work on classroom management and also in terms of teacher induction. And so we definitely want school to be a place where children are doing the work. A lot of times, as teachers, we'll say that we're so tired, we're just burnt out, we're this and that. But if you look in a school, sometimes in some school settings, the teacher is the one doing all the work. The kids are just sitting there. They come out of the school day from 6.5 hours and they're bursting with energy because they haven't been doing too much all day besides sitting and listening to someone else talk and do all of the work. And so we feel like the quote from Harry Wong, it definitely reflects the belief in the importance of education being an active process, right? We believe in active learning, where the teachers act as guides for the students and they guide their learning, but they're not the sage on the stage. They're the guide on the side. And the focus of the learning is also focused on whole development, on the child's whole development, not just the child, academically. That's just one portion. And so the Montessori method was developed by Dr. Maria Montessori over 40 years of researching and observing children. And during that time period, she said that education, she determined that education is a natural process and it's carried out by the child. It's not acquired by listening to words, but by experiences in the environment. And that's why Montessori education at the most basic level of understanding is about experiential learning, right? We're not going to just say a bunch of things. If we think about anything that that we've learned over the years, what do we learn best? We learn by experiencing it. If I tell you this is how you ride a bike, you sit on the bike, you put your hands on the handlebars, and you pedal your feet really, really fast, and this is how you ride a bike. This is not really going to help you to be able to ride a bike. Me talking about riding a bike. What's going to help you to be able to ride a bike is me helping you get onto a bike. No, I shouldn't put you on a bike and just say, ride, kid, ride, and you fall off the bike, right? Maybe I put some training wheels on it. Maybe I get you a balance bike first. Maybe I run behind you and I hold on to the seat of the bike while you gain your balance and you figure out how you need to keep your body in a steady state in order to hold the bike up. But no amount of talking about riding a bike is going to help you to actually be able to ride the bike. You have to actually get on the bike and ride the bike. And so that's what Montessori education in a nutshell is all about. We have the children always riding the bike, always riding the bike. So what she saw is that education is basically something that children have to do, and that the adults are just the guides. They're the preparers of the environment. They set it up in an environment so that children are going to have very rich experiences, right? So like I said, with my example with the bike, if I just put a child on a bike, the child most likely is going to fall off the bike and not want to ride the bike, right? So I have to prepare the environment for the child. I have to prepare the experience for the child so the child can be successful. And Montessori, we say that children are asking us to help me do it myself. So with my bike example, I might give the child some elbow pads, some wrist guards, a helmet. I might give the child some knee pads. Again, maybe some training wheels. When the training wheels come off, I might run behind the child and hold on to the bike while the child gets steady. And then eventually, when I see that the child is steady, I let the bike go, and then the child is off and riding. That's what Montessori education is all about. So, Montessori education is more than a method, it's a philosophy and it's really a way of life. And the reason why I'm so passionate about talking to people about Montessori education is because I feel like it's transformed my own life. It's transformed me as a teacher, it's transformed me as a parent, just as a person in general. Did it make me into a perfect being? No, because that doesn't exist. But what it has done is definitely made me much more mindful and intentional about what it is that I'm doing, because Montessori is a science and it's about respecting children and respecting all people as capable individuals. So in Montessori classrooms, one thing you're not going to see a whole lot of or worksheets and sit down lessons where young children, are sitting there for long periods of time. What you're going to see is you're going to see children with choice, you're going to see movement, you're going to see deep concentration. And these are things that you're going to see even from very young children. It's always child centered, it's always hands on, it always focuses on independence, respect, natural development. Montessori classrooms are always mixed age and they always have beautiful materials in them. If you look, these are actual pictures from our school, and these are actual students and actual teachers that have worked and gone to our school. As you can see, the teachers are guiding the children. They're down on the floor with them when they're working on the floor. This child is in the bathroom washing her hands, this infant child. The teacher is in there at a low sink with her, behind her, helping her to wash her hands. The children at the top are working with learning how to count to 100. The teacher is helping them with that work called the 100 word. There's another child, an infant child in the middle. He's eating a meal. The teacher is sitting off to the side. You can see her knee there. The teacher is helping him. It's not her sitting there feeding him. She's patiently sitting there as he picks up his little glass. He's got it in his hand. He's trying to learn to drink his milk. He has his spoon. She'll help him with guiding it. His placemat even shows him where the spoon goes, where the fork goes, where his bowl goes. All of these things help to be able to help children develop that focus, that independence, that concentration. And then you see that we move down to the bottom picture with a toddler child. She's able to get her own snack on her own. She's deeply focused on using those tongs. That's also helping her hands to develop. We have a lot of children that struggle with learning how to write later on, but in Montessori classrooms from the very beginning, from infancy, they're doing everything with their hands, intentional movements to move the wrists, to move the fingers, to get all of those fine motor skills in that are important so that later on when you're holding a pencil and you're writing, you're not stressed and strained in terms of being able to do that. And plus you're learning a practical life skill of how to prepare a snack or feed yourself as well. Okay. So when we look at how Montessori education, supports the child, we're looking at that these are the elements here in terms of what we see. I think you skipped one slide. Did you? No? Did I skip one? There we go. Huh. Okay. I'm not sure. So what we're looking at is that in Montessori education, we have an alignment between the teacher, the environment, and the child. And we are teaching the whole child. Okay. And so when we're looking at that, we're saying that these all have to be in alignment because we want to be able to support the educational domains that children are going through in early childhood and beyond. So it's not just in school about looking at the social, emotional, or the approaches to learning, or the language, or the cognitive, or the physical and motor development. It's about all of that because that's the whole person. We are social, emotional beings. We all do approach learning in different ways. We all do need to learn language. We all have to develop our cognitive abilities, and we all have to develop our physical and motor development abilities, capabilities as well. So that's what we do. We look at the children as whole people because an ideal educational environment for us is going to speak to all of this for a child. And this is why it's important for us in a Montessori classroom for the children to be able to have that freedom of movement, to be able to socialize with others, to be able to have that choice of what it is that they're going to do, to be able to work in an environment collaboratively and not have competition. That is such an important skill for your emotional development, right? When you're constantly working in competitive ways and trying to be first and having to one up someone, then that affects the way that you look at the world. So Montessori teachers are trained extensively in how to observe children, how to determine different ways that children are approaching learning. And we don't say in a Montessori classroom, well, this is the curriculum, this is what we do. We look and we say, okay, so this child approaches it this way. So we're going to adjust. And in that Montessori triad of learning that we have, we're looking and we're saying, okay, so if something is going awry in the classroom, what do we need to look at? First, we look at ourselves as the adults in the classroom, as the teachers, and we say, what is it that we need to do? Is there anything that we need to do differently? Then we look at the environment and we say, hmm, is the environment not set up for to be conducive for learning? And then finally we look at the child and we say, okay, well, is there something that we need, an additional support that this child may need in order to be successful? An example for this in our classrooms are when our school first opened. Our primary classroom is huge. It's over 700 square feet, so it's very large and it's long, and we would notice that the children would run through the classroom, run, 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 run. But it was because basically the way we had set up the classroom, the way we set up the environment told them to run. It was like a big landing strip in there. There was a one clear aisleway that was in the classroom. And so that little child looking at that clear path was like, this is something good to run. So they would run around the classroom. So instead of sitting there and saying, classroom. You to stop running around the classrooms. Down and do your work. We looked at the environment and we saw that we had this landing strip in there. And then we changed the way the environment was. So we made smaller nooks, smaller spaces that invited you to want to come and sit down and work in them versus running through the space because you had a cool landing strip in there. So that's what Montessori teachers are trained to do. And we are trained to prepare the environment. We spend a lot of time preparing the environment so that the children can use the environment in a way that is purposeful. Okay. So there are five core components of Montessori education. Montessori is the world over. You'll go to all the continents, you'll see Montessori classrooms on of the continents. And there's specific things that you're going to see in Montessori classrooms that are going to be the same, whether you're here, in Europe, Africa, Asia, Oceania, wherever you are, you're going to see certain things that are the same. So, Montessori educators, we view children as naturally eager, as naturally capable of initiating and pursuing learning guided by their own interests. And this is shown through the research of Maria Montessori. So, to support children as they learn, what we do is we prepare that environment for them. We have age appropriate environments that nurture their cognitive, social, emotional, and physical development. And so when you have a high fidelity Montessori implementation, you're going to have these five things. You're going to have trained Montessori teachers. I was a teacher for many years before I became a Montessorian. I had to still even though I had a college degree, even though I had a master's degree, even though I had years of experience, I still had to go get trained in Montessori because I had to understand how to utilize the materials, how the curriculum worked. The Montessori materials look very cute, but they're deliberate in what it is that they're doing. The children are learning very sophisticated things at a concrete level. Excuse me. So you have to know why they're doing what it is that they're doing so that you can guide their learning and direct them. So one mistake that some people will make is to think that they can come into a Montessori environment and teach in a Montessori environment because they love children. Of course, you should love children. That's just, a foundation, but you do have to be trained in how to utilize the materials and how the method works so that you understand the philosophy. So that's number one. A high fidelity Montessori classroom is going to have multi ages in it. So you will have usually children in an infant and toddler will be around 18-month difference. So you might have a classroom that has 0 to 18 months and then 18 months to 36 months. That would be like infant and then toddler. And then when you go from into pre-KK and up, you then have a 3-year cycle. So you will have a primary classroom that has 3-year-olds, 4-year-olds, and 5-year-olds. So pre-K 3, pre-K 4, and kindergartners in a classroom. So it's 3 to 6. You will have a lower elementary classroom that has first grade through third grade, an upper elementary classroom that might have fourth grade through sixth grade, a middle school program that might have seventh through ninth grade, and then high school, and adolescent programs as well. But they're always multi-age classrooms, and some you have to be comfortable with that, with multi-age classrooms. Some people are not. But in a Montessori setting, sometimes children are going to be the oldest, sometimes they're going to be the youngest, and sometimes they're going to be in between. But there are a lot of families today that the child is the only child. So this is the only setting where they're going to be in a multi-age setting, and children learn from one another. They learn from one another more so than they learn from adults. They pay attention to older children more so than they in a different way than they do adults. And older children pay attention to younger children and mentor them in a different way than adults, mentor them. We had a child in our school. This is her second year in our school. And this child, when she came last year, she was selected mute. She didn't speak at all. She would speak at home, but she never spoke at school. So her parents told us a lot of the time, she can speak. She has these conversations with us at home. They showed us some video of her, speaking at home, but at school she was selected mute. One day, the children they're just children. They don't know anything about selective mutism or anything like that. So they just kept talking to her all the time. And then one day I just heard them speaking with her and doing sight words. This is in our primary classroom. And they said to her, "What does this say?" And she was like, "This, and this and that," and speaking in complete sentences and talking with them. And after that, just rocking and rolling and getting more comfortable, but that was children that brought that out of another child. Older children that brought that out. Those were our kindergartners working with her and talking to her and wanting to be her friend and wanting to mentor her and wanting to help her. So definitely we agree with multi-age. A Montessori classroom should also have Montessori materials. You're going to go, like I said, if you go the world over and you look at Montessori classrooms, you're going to see the same Montessori materials in Madagascar that you will in Miami. You're going to see the same ones. Now, something that you might see that's different might be the practical life materials, because practical life looks different in different places. So depending on where you go, maybe you have different brooms and mops and different ways of cleaning and different ways, different utensils that you use and whatnot. But practical life skills are part of the Montessori curriculum. And then the other Montessori materials, the sensorial materials, the language materials, the math materials, you're going to see those that are going to be the same the world over. Of course, the language materials are in that language, but the concept and the design is the same. You're always going to see children directing their own work. In Montessori classrooms, children have choice. They don't, a teacher is not telling them what it is that they're supposed to do. A teacher gives them lessons. The children have work plans and from pre-K up, and then they have uninterrupted work periods. And it's a dance between the teachers and the students, because you don't need a teacher hovering over you all the time. You actually need some time to practice. So the teacher will help the child with a lesson, and then the child has a lot of time to then go back and practice that work. So they have that uninterrupted work period, which is between 90 minutes to 3 hours. And that's when they're doing, language and math and science and geography and history and art and, working with the sensorial and practical life, where they can choose all of that. It's not us sitting and saying, now you're going to do reading. Now you're going to do math. Now you're going to do social studies. So those uninterrupted work periods are very important. So you should see these 5 components in any authentic Montessori classroom. So in an infant and toddler curriculum, these are some of the things that you would see, in terms of the curriculum areas. They have practical life where they're learning how to care for themselves, washing their hands, dressing, care for the environment, sweeping, etc. Grace and courtesy is a component of the Montessori curriculum that I love, because I mean, how many people do we know as adults that they could use a little manners? And so in Montessori curriculum, we incorporate that from the very beginning. You have its direct lessons in how to say please. We don't assume that you know how to do that. We're teaching you how to say please, how to say thank you, how to say excuse me, how to wait in line, how to enter into play, how to tell someone no thank you, that you don't want to work with them at this particular time because that is your right. So the grace and courtesy lessons are a very powerful part of practical life. And we also teach them control of movement, how to pour things, how to spoon things, how to ladle things. And again, these have a primary aim of, yes, you need to know how to pour and spoon and ladle, but they also have a secondary aim of helping you with reading and writing because of the directionality that we use when we are doing them. They also have sensory motor, where they're talking about sensory exploration, learning about that, visual and auditory discrimination. They're learning and practicing with their fine motor development. They also work on a language, having conversations, vocabulary building, building their phonetic awareness, reading and writing. We have art that's infused into the curriculum. In Montessori classrooms, typically the children don't get pulled out for like specials. They're in the classroom. There's just part of it. You do art, you do music, you do all of those things within the classroom. And we have a focus, especially in art, with process over product, a focus on exploration. You're not going to see us hang up everybody's little Mother's Day flower, or everybody's Earth Day globe, or anything like that. It's going to be about the process of working with the art and using the materials and learning how to explore and to manipulate. And then there's also large motor areas in infant and toddler classrooms where they have climbing and hopping and balls and balance and rhythm activities. Again, all of this is infused into the classroom, because in Montessori we believe that all the elements work together, and the teacher prepares the environment based on the developmental needs of the children. And then the environment calls to the child in that way to focus that child's energy. And so when a child feels like they don't need to work on that skill anymore, they go and they work on something else. And then the teachers are continuing to monitor them. Again, this is done by trained people that know how to direct the children in specific ways. Okay. So a little bit about Maria Montessori, who actually developed the Montessori method. She opened the first Montessori school in 2000, in 1907, not 2007, but 1907. And I think that, really it was her own background and upbringing that influenced the way that she saw education. Because as a child herself, she was very curious, and her parents actually encouraged that. And she wanted to study math and science at a time when there were no schools for math and science for girls. And so she actually went to a school with all boys. And in spite of all those obstacles, she was very determined, and she became the first female physician in Italy. And she was a real trailblazer for that. She wasn't well respected by the medical profession. And what they did was they put her in what they felt was the lowest of the low positions, and that was for her to work with women and children. And that was thought to be the lowest form of medicine at the time. And so they placed her in a hospital with children with so-called mental defects. And she saw that the children were, behaving in such a manner because there was really nothing for them to do. And she said that what the hand does, the mind remembers, right? And so she started to develop what she called the didactic materials in order to give the children hands-on experiential things in terms of how to learn a concept. And that's where Montessori starts with everything. Everything in a Montessori classroom starts from the concrete. So she was able to work with the children so much that they actually did better on the Italian exam than the so-called, quote, normal children. Because again, she said the hand is the pathway to the brain. And so she was really the one that really encouraged that experiential learning and that hands-on learning. And so she went on and did that for many years. And then she eventually started working with her son, Mario. Her son, Mario, she didn't have the ability to raise him until he was 12, because at the time she was an unwed mother. And that was not something, that was something that was frowned upon at the time. And so he was raised until the age of 12 by another family. He went to visit him and saw him frequently, but she wasn't allowed to, have him with her. And so I think that that also has something to do with her love for children, because she was not able to care for her own child in that way because of the time. And so she and her son Mario developed a very close relationship, and then they started to be able to travel the globe. Montessori came to the United States in 1920, and she and her son basically traveled the globe teaching people this method. She was actually kicked out of Italy by Mussolini after the World War, and she went to India and lived there for a while because Mussolini wanted to use all of the Montessori schools to promote the fascist regime, and she didn't want that. So he burned them all up and exiled her from the country. But she went on with her son, and that helped her to bring Montessori all over the world, and that's what we see now. So she's left us a lasting legacy of her over 40 years of research, of watching children and how they learn, and then developing these materials. And now today we're seeing with the brain research that she was right. You know, the Montessori method is time tested. So the materials that she developed over 100 years ago are still relevant and in use today. They still capture the senses of the child because Maria Montessori spent a lot of time observing the children at various stages of their development, and her findings help to develop a method of education that's truly child-centered. And so that's one thing for me as an educator that I really appreciate about the method. I used to get very frustrated when every few years we have to throw out the curriculum. And I'm like, I mean, why, you know? And so with the Montessori method, yes, there's things, Montessori didn't have the technology that we have now and whatnot, but the grounds of the method are following the child. So, and the practical life experiences. So, in the day and age that they live in, if you understand the method, then you can take what is there for them, computers and all these types of things that we have for technology now, and you can use those in a way that will help them, in terms of the 21st century. So basically, in a nutshell, this is what Maria Montessori said. She said that young children have what's called an absorbent mind. So you can see this little girl, Rachel, look at her brain. She is looking at her teacher and she is paying attention. This mind is like a sponge, right? So she said they are sponges. They soak up the information that's around them. And if they're provided with the appropriate learning environment, then they're going to have the internal motivation to learn. And that's what you see in Montessori classrooms. The children are busy little bees because they have that internal motivation to learn because the environment is deliberately and intentionally, mindfully, whatever word we want to use today, prepared for the children so that they will be able to soak up that learning and they'll be internally motivated to actually learn. So she said that through hands-on experiential learning, where the teacher is a guide. Notice in all these pictures that you're seeing of the Montessori teachers, they're down on the floor with the children, or they're nowhere to be found, right? Because they're over working with somebody else. But the teacher is a guide. It's not the teacher standing up in front of everybody. Okay, everyone, right now we're going to learn the letter A. Everyone say ah, 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 ah. And then someone is like lost because they don't know the difference between a letter, a number, a shape, a color, and someone is bored because they know how to read on whatever level and they don't want to hear ah, 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 ah. Or it's not where a teacher is ringing a bell and saying ding, 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 ding. Now it's time to move to the next table, move here, move there. They have 3 hours in a preschool, kindergarten, Montessori classroom for work. And in that time, they are able to work in anywhere in the classroom that they want to. And the teachers work with them on their specific lessons. Yes, we have lesson plans. They're all individualized for each child. So yes, there's sometimes the children are doing something in a whole group. That's called circle time. Sometimes the children are doing something in a small group where the teacher knows that the children have the same needs and they are ready to do this activity together and it makes sense to do this work together and they'll work with them in a small group. And sometimes their teachers are working with the children one-on-one and individually, but they're always guiding the children and the instruction is always individualized because when you have individualized instruction, then you can fully maximize your own potential, right? And what they learn and create is amazing. And that's why I'm never doing anything else besides Montessori until I retire. So the key to Montessori is really the student choice because there is a set scope, there is a set sequence there for the method, but how the children move through the lessons and how they structure their day is through choice. And they're taught to how to go about making good choices for themselves, and they're thereby more motivated to be able to learn. And so in these pictures, what you see is that what a Montessori classroom looks like at the preschool and kindergarten level. And you see one student is doing a science activity, one student's doing math work, one student is doing language work. They're all working on something that they need to work on at that time. They've already had lessons from the teacher and now they're practicing. And now they're practicing. We're not saying, okay, now we're moving on to lesson 1.5 and the child is like, well, I didn't understand lesson 1.4. Or the other child is like, can we move to lesson 2.7? Because I already know how to do all this stuff. They're all working at their own pace. And then you see in the other picture that one child's working on math, and then another child is working on what we call sensorial work. He's practicing the bells and learning how to play a song behind him. And I really love the Montessori materials because they're well made and they stand up over time and they're just so concrete and help the children. So this kindergarten child right here is learning the decimal system to the thousands. Is it anything that's strenuous and stressful and he's sitting here? No, He's just playing because Montessori said that play is the work of the child. He's just playing. And so he's sitting there. He's got his one beads, he's got his 10 bars, he's got his 100 squares, and then there's 1,000 cubes. And he's got that visual representation so that when he goes to make those big numbers, he's going to understand what those numbers represent, what that place value is, how the decimal system works. And I've seen this in action with my own child. My oldest child is 14 years old now, and she's now taking geometry. She's in eighth grade and she's taking geometry. And she said to me, you know what, Mom? I see all of those things. I remember the division board. I remember this. I remember. And so she can see the visuals. It wasn't just someone saying 4,279. And you're like, well, what does that mean? She can see all of those visual representations. And so that's what we do in Montessori. When a child is in the absorbent mind phase, we're saying, soak it up. And then you're going to retrieve this later on because you have all these concrete experiences from which to pull from. Um, Montessori said that there are sensitive periods. When she was studying the children, this is what she saw. So, one of the reasons why the education is so successful is because it relies on observing children and knowing when they are entering a sensitive period. And it's very exciting for us as Montessorians when we see a child entering a sensitive period because we're like, ooh, okay, now they're ready for this, right? And so, in a Montessori classroom, for example, let's take movement. The sensitive period for movement is between 0 and 1. Sometime between, well, between 2 by the time they're 19 months, they should be. So by that time, the children are going to walk. By the time they're around 19 months, at least that old, they should be, typically, if they're typically developing, then they're going to be walking sometime around that time. So you'll see in a Montessori infant classroom, there's space. There, you got to move. You're not strapped into any high chairs or anything. You move around, you're crawling, then you're pulling along on things, then you're pushing things along, then you're walking. Everything is designed for that. So it's the same thing with all of these other sensitive periods of language. That's why our school is bilingual, because the sensitive period for language is 0 to 6. A lot of times we don't start teaching children a second language until they're in middle school. And, the sensitive period, not saying that someone can't learn a language then, but the sensitive period for it is 0 to 6. So why not teach them at that point in time? So these are all different sensitive periods for music and order and toileting, grace and courtesy, senses, writing, reading, spatial, math. And what we do is we look to see when is a sensitive period for something, when a child is entering it, and it's a zone. It's sometime in between that zone. And then we give them that work that they need at that particular time for their sensitive period. And it's just so fascinating to watch because it happens all of the time. So one of the things that we look at in terms of Montessori is the trust that we build with children. Montessori really matters because we just foster lifelong love of learning. You do not hear children in Montessori classrooms saying they're bored, they don't want to come to school, they don't want to do it. They're asking to come on the weekend. Their parents are having to take them out of the school and they're saying it's time to go home. And we're saying to them, hey, you can come back tomorrow or you can come back on Monday. This work will be here for you. Don't worry. They have built independence and focus and concentration and confidence. And that's important because you can learn anything, right? You have to have that motivation. You have to be able to focus to be able to do that. You have to be able to, in the workplace, be able sometimes to work independently. You have to have that confidence to be able to go and pursue it. So in Montessori classrooms, we teach to mastery. You don't get any grades. You teach to mastery. So if you need to do that lesson over 10 times, do it 10 times. I'm not going to move you to something else. I'm going to keep you with that lesson because you need to master that and then move on. And it also respects cultural and developmental differences. Just because you're 3, every 3-year-old is not in the same place, right? Somebody even if you look at a 3-year-old, if you look at a 3-year-old classroom, somebody could have been born in October, someone December, somebody in March, somebody in August. whenever, but they maybe everybody's all three at this particular point in time. And, but they're older and younger, and that makes a big difference. And then there are different experiences that they've had. And so we're looking at their developmental needs, and we respect that. And we say, we're not saying, oh, just because you're three, this is what you should be doing. We say, okay, we're looking at you as an individual. And then we're saying, okay, this is where you are, this is where we want you to get to, and how are we going to walk that path with you in order for you to get there, right? So the teachers develop a deep and long-term relationship with their students, and you're going to see children in Montessori classrooms choosing that work and doing things because they want to, not because they have to, because they have a deep relationship and a trust with their teachers. And it's just a beautiful, really spirit of community that you see in Montessori classrooms. Um, so what is it like to teach in a Montessori infant and toddler classroom? If you look at these photos, you can see these are photos from our actual school. Our youngest classrooms are built around trust and care. So yes, we do all the typical things of diapering children and helping them with eating and things like that. But we also look really hard at observing them, looking at the different transitions. Everything that we have in the classroom is deliberate. The teachers definitely are guiding the children more than they direct the children. And a Montessori environment should feel like home to a child. It should feel like, oh, am I home away from home? So you can see that these spaces are, the paint on the walls looks like paint that you might have in your home. It's not bright, it's not overly stimulating for the children. It's at their level. And so we try to create beautiful, calm, structured, nurturing environments with an emphasis on routine, care of self, exploration, and the teachers are always observing and then instructing the children. So it's just a very wonderful and beautiful place to be. I really love being in infant environments, especially because it's just, they're so free in there. I love this little table at the bottom of the screen. That's an actual table in our infant classroom. It's very small, and the children are able to get up and down from that table. They set the table. Those chairs are only 5 inches off of the floor, so everyone's feet can touch the floor. That table, that's a coffee table. We actually cut the legs down and painted that. And so it's really nice to be in these environments that are intentionally and deliberately created for young children. Another thing you'll see again is uninterrupted and meaningful work. This is a picture of a child in our infant classroom. She's 1 year old, and she is cleaning the chair. So chair washing is one of the works, and it helps with your wrist movement. So later on, when you're like trying to write in cursive and just strengthening your hand, but also it gives you the satisfaction of having a really clean chair. This is meaningful work, right? We didn't give her a fake broom and a fake mop and a fake this. There's water in there. There's some soap. There's a real scrub brush. She's got a real apron on. And you see that she is deliberate and she is intentional about her work. She is cleaning that table, and she's going to have, that chair, and she's going to have the satisfaction of, you see the little child sitting across from her who's watching her. So she has a satisfaction of doing something for her community, right? I cleaned the chair so that someone can sit down in this beautiful chair that I have cleaned. So always meaningful and uninterrupted work. So one thing that people will say sometimes about Montessori classrooms is that Montessori is not real. This isn't real life. You can't just do whatever you want in real life. And I just want to show how Montessori education actually does prepare children for the workforce and what it is that, they're doing in the 21st century. So Montessori is very self-directed. When children are making decisions about their learning, it mirrors the independence that's required in today's workforce, where employees have to manage their own tasks, and it also promotes critical thinking, where encouraging children to solve problems on their own is a vital step in the workplace. This child is working on something called trinomial cube. It's actually algebra, but it's concrete algebra for the children. Again, they're just playing. I have to match the colors to the colors. But when you go back and you look at a squared plus b squared equals c squared, you see the trinomial cube in your head, and then you can actually understand how the equation works, how it works together, why does it do what it does. And she's 3 and doing algebra in a concrete way. So, in terms of Montessori education, it also promotes collaboration, right? So, you have mixed age groups and it encourages teamwork and social skills. So, you see that you have a 5-year-old child there. She's reading to a child that's 3. So, this is a book that he couldn't yet access, but she's able to access it and help him in that way. It also has practical life skills that we've talked about quite a lot, where they have to organize themselves, they have to learn time management, and all of these skills are things that we need to have in routine everyday work, right? We have to be able to manage our time. We have to be able to collaborate with other people. We have to be able to work in a team. We have to have social skills. So all of these children are learning this from a very young age. Montessori children are also driven by internal motivation, right? What does internal motivation do? It fosters a passion and a commitment in the work, right? So in today's work environment, it's a fast changing work environment. You have to be able to be adaptable. You have to be able to continuously learn, not saying that when you go into any industry, 20 years or 30 years out, when you're retiring, that industry is going to be vastly different. And so what Montessori does is it teaches children to embrace challenges and to grow from those challenges, right? So you've got a child learning how to make a sandwich, and that's a real sandwich. We didn't give him a fake little plastic piece of peanut butter and say, play, make a sandwich. We said, okay, make a sandwich. So the intrinsic motivation and that joy is, hey, I get to eat this sandwich that I just made. There's no grades, there's no stars, there's no anything. It's the intrinsic motivation, the intrinsic joy that you feel that you've made this sandwich. And this other child, he's taken this skeleton, and these are actual x-rays of a skeleton, and he's putting this together, and it's the sheer joy of being able to do this. Additionally, we see that Montessori prepares children with real world skills, right? So they have all of this hands-on learning to be in practical situations, practical real life situations, hands-on learning there. So they're nurturing their leadership skills. Their children teaching other children how to wash the dishes, how to pour. Once they know how to do that, they take responsibility for it. They help other children to be able to do it, and they just are always helping with their peers. So when we see here with Montessori education, we see that it's purposeful play, right? Because we call it work because Maria Montessori said that play is the work of the child. So when you hear us saying work in a Montessori classroom, it's out of respect because we know that this play has a purpose. It's aligned with the 21st century skills of independence, collaboration, problem solving, and leadership. It's preparing students for success because it's fostering the skills needed for success in modern workspaces. These are the qualities that employers and that the workforce just values today. So when people say that Montessori is unrealistic, I think we need to take a second look at that and look and see, what does our workforce look like? Does it look more like what we've shown you in these classrooms, or does it look more like what we might see in some other settings? And I would veer toward what we see in this classroom. So I'm just going to share a little bit about what we're looking for in our school in case there's anyone who is interested in looking for and seeking employment. We are currently hiring for head teachers. So for to be a head teacher, you would either need to have a Montessori credential or an early childhood credential. If you have an early childhood credential, then we would help you to be able to get your Montessori credential. So that would be if you have a bachelor's degree, an associate's degree, a master's degree. Um, if you're someone who has experience working with young children and you perhaps have a high school diploma or a CDA, a Child Development Associate certificate, you could apply to be one of our assistant teachers. If you're a passionate person, nurturing, team-oriented, and if you're bilingual, that's always a plus. And again, we do help people who are interested in pursuing their Montessori training. We do help and we will support in that. There are different pathways that you can pursue, and we are always happy to help people to enter into Montessori education. Again, for you're welcome. um for bilingual instruction, if you're a bilingual person, that's also a plus as well. And in terms of the Montessori career path, if you are interested and you don't have a credential, you could always start as an assistant and grow. If you already have a degree, you're off to a strong start, and we can help to get MACT training, which is Montessori training, that you would have for your credential, and opportunities to grow into a lead teacher role. And if you get your Montessori credential, then one thing that it does is that you're able to utilize that all over. You can use it wherever you go. You don't have to get another credential going from school to school. You're able to use that if you go, like I said, from Miami to Madagascar, you can use your Montessori credential. So there are the Montessori accreditation and training through the American Montessori Society or the Association Montessori International. And if you're interested in pursuing that, we do help people again with being able to pursue their Montessori certification. We do have a partnership with a training center where scholarships and assistance are available to help with, covering the cost. In terms of our school itself, we believe in, taking care of our teachers, not just financially, but also emotionally and professionally. Our school is really a team, and we really believe in supporting each other. So we do have a competitive salary. We do offer healthcare assistance through Coursera, which is, a reimbursement plan. We do have a commuter benefit. We do have a 403B retirement plan, and we do have paid time off and professional development, paid time for professional development as well, because we do believe that we are a team and we need to support our teachers' growth. So, in a nutshell, again, Montessori is solid academics and more. We ensure that there's an alignment between what the state standards are, our Montessori scope and sequence, but it's so much more. We want our children to receive a whole child education. We want them to love coming to school, and we want them to love learning. So the last question that I have is that it's just a rhetorical question, is just asking yourself, we know that Montessori works for all children. Maria Montessori started the school with children who they called defective children. She started the school with children who they were called the low income children in a tenement. And these children were people that they said they couldn't learn anything, and they proved them wrong. So it's for all races, all ethnicities, all socioeconomic backgrounds, all abilities, just all children. And so the question becomes, does Montessori work for you as an educator? And what is it that you value? So if you're thinking that you'd like to go and look into Montessori more with your career, you might want to ask yourself the following questions. You might want to say, do I see the value of a child being in a classroom with children of differing ages? Because Montessori classrooms are mixed ages. Do I see the value of a child being able to choose how he or she will work on the classroom assignments? Student choice. Do I see the value of a child being able to move about the classroom freely? Free movement. And do I see the value of a child learning through a discovery model where the activities are all hands-on? That's discovery learning. So if you can comfortably say yes to those questions, then perhaps Montessori education and a career in Montessori education is for you. If not, there are different ways of approaching education, and I encourage people to find what speaks to them. So if you are interested in applying to our school, if anything I've said here has sparked your interest, you can definitely reach out to us and we're happy to talk to you. You can email your resume to info@bergen-lafayette-montessori.com. We're hiring for the fall of 2025. Head teachers start August 18th and assistant teachers start August 25th. So we'd love to hear your story and we'd love to help you explore next steps. And so if there are any questions, then we will take those at this time. If not, you can feel free to just go ahead and email us and we are happy to reach out to you. So thank you so much for attending and we hope to hear from you.